the idea that BlackRock has been able to capsize so much of kind of our country's ethical framework is really because that we have given them the power to do it. The fact that we invest through them and in them is really the way in which they have so much sway over us.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty in Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for January 8th through January 15th, 2024, while supplies last. First this week, we feature backdated 1/4 ounce gold eagles at just $65 over melt. Next, the Armenian 1 ounce silver Noah's Ark coin is $3.49 over spot. And finally, we have a very limited quantity of 1 ounce silver Trump Wanted bars at $3.15 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty in Finance. And back with us today is Jacob Imam from New Polity and also the founder of the College of St. Joseph the Worker. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us again today.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be back with you.
Well, it's great to have you. Last time we had you on, we were talking about kind of how money has changed over the past century or more. And also we were discussing investing from a moral point of view. How do we consider everything involved and know that our money is really being put forth for the best purpose, right? And I wanted to kind of jump in right where we left off there in investing. So if you wanted to give us kind of a broad overview, and we can get to some of the specifics then going forward here, but how do people look at investing from a moral point of view?
Well, I think it all starts with the definition, really, not to sound too bookish here, but most of us, when we think about investing, we think about ways of making money or putting our money to work, right? When in our modern age, investing is kind of synonymous with easier profits, or for some of us, that's what we do for our day job. Others of us, it's a nice kind of thing on the side. But in both cases, I think that it's kind of neglecting the operations of the subject itself. And by that, I mean, we look at, when we say things like investment is for, making a bit more money, that is really the end result. Like what happens at the very end is I get more money, hopefully, if you do it right. But to look at the operations, like how do you get money, is really the starting block. Is where we have to begin the conversation. And so I would say there we have to consider a couple different definitions. From the Catholic tradition, what I am very happily find myself, you get a very clear and straightforward definition from Pope St. John Paul II, and that is to offer someone an opportunity to make good use of their labor. I would say from maybe not a pope, you could see, just looking at the word itself of investing. I mean, the idea of investing is that you're being robed with new power and new potential. What's fundamentally happening is that you're giving somebody money to be able to do something that they otherwise would not be capable of doing. That is a new instrumental cause to someone's efficacy. It's just kind of like, putting a hammer in a carpenter's hand. He's going to be able to get a lot more done with it than without it. He's going to be able to do things with it that he otherwise would not be able to do. That's the idea, the couch in the very word investing. And I think what John Paul II says is just kind of an obviously good definition of it, is stemming from the interaction between peoples. So the beginning then of any questions about the morality of investment has to be a consideration of whom am I building up, and what are they in turn building up? And once we can have a square answer at those two questions, then I think we're going to be in a pretty fun conversation about not only the morality of investing itself, but also what type of world we're building up to, because it's not like when you invest money, nothing's done. Some sort of work is being proclaimed, actually introduced into the world. Investing is always some sort of a cultural activity insofar as it literally, physically, actually builds up a place in a way that it was not built up before. So it's not just kind of like a Puritan question about, what's right and wrong, but also what's the type of world that you want to live in.
It is very interesting. You mentioned how when you invest with someone, you really give them power, like giving them a hammer, right? Power that they didn't have before. And I think a lot of people, when they approach investing, are thinking, well, what is going to get me the most returns, right? You might be analyzing a stock and like, oh, well, this stock looks like it's going to be moving higher soon, so I should go on investing. It seems like from your point of view, there's a lot more to consider here.
I certainly think so. I mean, if you think about the end result of just being, more money in your pocket, then you oftentimes setting yourself up not only to live a very isolated life, but you're also setting yourself to live a pretty boring life, I would say, as well. I live in a small, dilapidated Rust Belt town in Steubenville, Ohio, and it's so funny because we once were this great metropolitan area competing with Pittsburgh because of the wealth coming in from not only oil and gas, but really steel. The steel industry was here, and it's so funny because there's quite a bit of old wealth still in town that they have now taken and invested in, kind of the usual modern virtual assets, and in doing so sent it all off to New York. And so we still live in a town where 2/3 of our storefronts are all boarded up, and it's like, man, this could actually be a much more enjoyable place for you to live if you put your money here. And so I think that is kind of it's kind of funny when we think about the operations of investing rather than the end result of investing, that you really get to take out kind of a designer's pencil and say, what do I want my town to be like? How can I put my money where my life is, rather than sending it far away?
To look at concrete examples, I mean, obviously you mentioned the town that you live in and how a lot of the wealth has really been taken out of the town based on how people have been investing. Another concrete example that you've mentioned before is how when people invest, for example, in their 401k or IRA, and then just invest in kind of random companies by choosing a mutual fund, you give so much power to large companies, for example, BlackRock. And we see this trend. A lot of people are wondering, why are these companies, like Disney and so forth, like why are so many companies out there going, woke, you could say, and having these agendas when it doesn't seem like it's actually good for society. So can you expand on that? How, I guess, again, the need to be intentional when investing, but a lot of investment paths like mutual funds that people don't initially think of as being potentially harmful really can be in the long run.
Yeah, we live in this amazing era where we don't need to know what we're investing in to do it. This phenomenon of blind investing where we are just buying, these baskets of stocks through different means is really phenomenal. And the only thing that we really look at, whether or not as it pertains to a mutual fund or pertains to these ETFs, is that whether or not you are looking at really all that pertains to it is the numbers, at the end of the day, like what's the percentage growth, right? The phenomenon of that is really only brought about by people that really do not care about what they're building. And it's just pretty obvious. The idea that BlackRock has been able to capsize so much of kind of our country's ethical framework is really because that we have given them the power to do it. The fact that we invest through them and in them is really the way in which they have so much sway over us. Another thing that the Catholic Church and some of their documents say is that societal structures are not so much the cause of our behavior, but more so the effects of them. Again, this seems like pretty obviously true insofar as we have built up BlackRock little by little. And again, that all emerges, I think we were chatting about this last time, from what we are actually putting forward as our primary desires. Now, of course, once somebody's in power, they're going to do everything they can to stay in power. I mean, now the ESG thing didn't really work out for BlackRock all that well. I mean, goodness, what a loss this last year. But and they haven't really quite given up on it yet. We're trying to figure out what's going on. But it was a brilliant maneuver for them, not so much that they believed in kind of the political lines that they were touting. I'm not to just show my cards and just say I think they were cynical about that. But what we do know about them is that the profit and return was the primary goal of their company. And once you have this quasi-monopoly or this incredible dominance in the market, then you're going to start to leverage every available avenue to ensure that your competitors are not going to be able to truly compete with you anymore. And so by having all of these qualifications that BlackRock now by BlackRock having all these qualifications for these companies, like if you want in on these ESGs, like have your company included, you're going to have to, have some of these various agendas as promoted. You're going to have to promote some of these agendas. And so we see this, I mean, most phenomenally in Target and Bud Light and whatever else, is that people are desperately trying to be included within their investments, and it just doesn't go well for anybody. Now, within the system collapsing, we'll see what they pivot to next. But you have to say that's freaking clever, man, that you tried that out, and it's really out of our control to see what ultimately they try next. I think as long as we keep our desires, they're going to keep theirs. Our desires being a higher return, they're going to have their desires and being a higher return too, and they're going to use various strategies that we may or may not agree with to meet that end.
What are some prudent steps that people can take to, I guess, get outside of the system so that their funds are not being used for, I guess you could say, nefarious purposes, right? In some cases, definitely nefarious purposes there. So how much inside the system and how much outside of the system should people be?
Well, I really think that this system was built up in a way that doesn't reflect the best of humanity. Now, let me try and define this. We've been using the term investing here quite a bit. I think this is a complete misnomer for what happens within the stock market. Now, it's pretty much, I'm sure everybody knows, but if you don't, let's just get a quick reminder that the stock market really operates not as a primary market, but as a secondary market, meaning that people are buying and selling assets from one another and not from the company directly. This is an analogy that I like to use is to say that it's like a guy going to a baseball game and buying a ticket from the ticket booth and then turning around and becoming a scalper and selling it to somebody else. And then that person then turns around and becomes a scalper himself and he sells it to someone else. And that ticket continuously gets sold to other people without anyone ever going to the game. That is how the modern secondary market operates, is that we are constantly buying and selling from one another. So traditionally, just by strict economic definitions here, we would call this speculating. Now, speculation is a very straightforward technical definition. It occurs when someone buys something on the market, holds it without the intention of ever utilizing it or changing it, and intending to procure a profit based purely on market fluctuations. Okay, so in this case, you buy something, you hope that the price for it goes up in the future, and then you sell it back. But you have done nothing profitable in the meantime. This is speculation. And so that is definitionally what is going on in the stock market. Now, we oftentimes in non-technical ways use that term in a pejorative way of somebody who's really kind of breaking the system and changing things up. But strictly speaking, that's what's going on. And so I really think that if we want to cultivate the best of humanity, then we have to give ourselves as much as we can so that we are not buying something and holding it without intending gain, without any productive input, without any value add. We're going to have to change that around and actually start to cultivate the common good in our activities. I think that's a big difference between just the definition of investment and the definition of speculation. These are two really fundamentally different things. And we have to kind of a hard choice for all of us to say is to make is, do I want to be an investor or do I want to be a speculator?
That's very interesting. And as you mentioned, speculation kind of not being concerned about where the money is going, just that I want to sell for a higher price later. I did want to ask you, because we do talk a lot on this show about precious metals, right? And one of the main reasons that I think people should hold a little bit of precious metals is to secure their finances, right? To have a solid foundation. I think a secondary reason is there are a lot of bullish factors out there in my mind to say that the price of precious metals will increase in the future. So there's those two purposes, I guess you could say. But so one of being, okay, this is the foundation of our financial lives. It's real money. But the other, it seems like, kind of matches your definition of speculation. So I wanted to get your perspective on that. And I'm perfectly fine with, disagreeing about this. I just would love to hear your perspective and kind of what your idea is on the morality of holding precious metals.
Yeah, it's a great question, and bless you too for being so vulnerable and actually inviting someone to potentially critique you. I'm not going to do that though. So I think that there's a couple of ways of evaluating this. One is that, and this is an argument that we all know as gold bugs, that gold retains its value over time. So that when we say things that we're bullish for gold next to the USD primarily, right? That's how we track its value today. But if we're really comparing its purchasing power as gold, is that retains its same power over time. And this is one of the great things that apologists love to say about gold. And one of the reasons that I'm a proponent of precious metals is that it does have some sort of a true relationship to the rest of the economy that's not fabricated out of thin air as the USD is. Okay, so on the one hand, you would say that it's going up but from one perspective next to the USD, but looking at the real economy, there's a different picture going on. And if you are trying to justly retain what you have truly earned, I think precious metals for the long run is a great way of doing that. Now, there's other considerations, of course, to make is that what about just saving up, hordes of money? Like, why would you do that? And I think there's many reasons not to do that. And I think for the most part, I find very convincing in the Catholic tradition that things don't go well when people do that. Now, we live at a period of what scholars like to call a cash nexus, where our ability to obtain or procure anything happens through the modal use of money. Like we need money for everything is what I'm trying to say, And so in times past, that was just not the case, that we have made society into one great big market. In the past, the market was a physical location in a city that you could point to and you could talk about. And now it's Everything's the market. People didn't used to be able to be alienated from their homes and from their land. Now this is one of the biggest assets that you have is land or your house. So we have to realize that we are not only in a rare point of history, but we are in a very, very strange point of history as well. I mean, this is not usual that we're in. So that when Thomas Aquinas back in the Middle Ages and he's writing this treatise on kingship, it's literally a letter to a king. He talks about why it's probably good that a king have a savings account. And he calls it like a store of metal, of gold and silver. As somebody that is almost like an exception to the rest of society. I mean, nobody even thinks about holding a store of value. It's not needed. It's a primarily agricultural environment and market as well. But the king should probably have something just in case. Well, now we're all kings in our society. Everything is an expense. And so to be able to protect ourselves in this situation, I think it's obviously justifiable. Now, again, turning to that point, that other consideration about the structures of society, are they causes or are they effects? And clearly they are more effects on our life, but then they turn around and they're causes as well. So I think we have to really take these things into account and not just say things are different, I'm going to utilize all new strategies. Rather, we have to say things are different. We have to see that we have to do a few things different, but hopefully the vector of our lives will enable us to create different structures. So I don't think that there's an easy one-to-one, the modern economy is doing this. I don't like the modern economy, and therefore I can do this easy pivot and start investing over here or saving in this way. I really do think that it's going to be a totalizing shift of our lifestyles, and that's, I hope, daunting, but also hopeful for people. So we can't just kind of do the same things and tweak it a little bit to get a different world. We're going to have to actually up and change quite a bit.
I know two aspects that you have really focused on. You co-wrote an article on your website, New Polity, about investing, and you mentioned ownership and responsibility. If you could expand on that and how people can incorporate when they're considering what to do with their finances and how to invest, to make sure that where they're investing, they have ownership and they also have responsibility.
Yeah. Thanks for asking about that. Ownership's a tough one in our modern society because a lot of people think about ownership as purely a juridical abstract. That's not traditionally how it's considered. I mean, even in John Locke, there's a different narrative about how someone procures something and able to call it their own. That happens through working it, through changing it, to actually putting your imprint on it. Use is ultimately what defines ownership, and then the law merely recognizes that. So that means that you have some sort of personal relationship to what you own, but also responsibility over it. I think of a good example, just to make sure that this is patently clear, is that we would often blame someone if they don't take responsibility over what they own. I think about like a dog. Like if I don't train my dog, if I don't put my dog on a leash, I just like let it run around and it's biting the neighbors, then my neighbors probably have a right to shoot my dog, if not me as well. And that is the same situation for all of our goods and all of our assets, is that we have some sort of real responsibility over it, so that it actually is not a curse to our neighbor, but a blessing to our neighbor, and that we are actually building up the common good, building up our neighborhoods, building up our cities by actually having real care over the parts of it that are ours. I think in the case of just having some sort of like purely juridical ownership of something that you've never seen, that you never use, that really cannot be used, that's just a pretense. Like that's just an idea. It's a figment of our imagination that does not truly capture reality. So I think that when it comes to the general teaching on ownership, it is ultimately a case about responsibility. And this is when we look back at kind of early America and we see the praise of the yeoman farmer, or even just in the 20th century as we were praising the small business owner, in saying how virtuous that those citizens are. And Jefferson and Madison and others, talk about this explicitly, is that they're grounded in a place, they're grounded in a land, that they're grounded in a community, that then they are taking care in their capacity as much as it is. They're taking care of what they have and those around them. It sets you up, true ownership in which you have this personal relationship with it, where you can touch and feel, develop, and cultivate it. That sort of ownership really brings out the best of you and really does engender a great society. So I think that all the occasions where we have surrendered our control and thus surrendered our responsibility, we need to take a pretty careful second look at.
That's so interesting. It's so, how divorced are we from that sort of ownership and responsibility today in investing? When we look at, the stock market, even if we're in mutual funds, obviously we're very much divorced from that. If we look at just individual stocks, how many people owning stocks nowadays actually have much of a say in what happens to the company?
Oh, I mean, you legally don't have any, actually. I mean, this is a very important point that even if you talk about like quarterly votes or something like that, you don't have the choice of who's even on the board. You don't even have a choice of voting against anybody or in the fact that those who are elected don't even need to have a majority vote is really quite telling as well. The fact that when you vote on certain new policies of the company, that those are technically speaking recommendations rather than decisions is really important. The technical language is in the legal literature about corporate ownership talks about the divorce between ownership and control. Well, philosophically, that's just impossible. That's just a nonsensical statement, and yet that is actually how our legal code is currently written. And there's some good historical reasons, or not good historical reasons. There's some historical reasons for why that is the case. But I would say at the end of the day that we will not be able to have a stable market economy if we are not stable in our own thoughts. Like if there are performative contradictions going on, let alone logical contradictions going on, then we're never going to ultimately find a place of true justice in the market. Definitely.
And I did want to is there a way we can adapt this to the modern day? I know we've had Joel Salatin on from Polyface Farms, and he has talked about how there are some farmers nowadays with how cheap it is to ship meat and to ship goods to different parts of the country. You're having fresh food, but you're having it shipped halfway across the country, and you can buy from a local farmer in that respect. So how much of this can we adopt to the internet age, the age of transportation and all of that, where it's not necessarily, do you think it's necessary that we are building a community locally, or can we also be, I think that's definitely important, but can we also be applying these principles where we can still reach people that might be halfway across the world or halfway across the country?
Yeah, it is funny living in an imperial age. I mean, there's just no doubt about it that is what America is. And And there's no doubt also that good can be done locally and good can be done at a distance too. I think for most of us, though, we have the greatest power locally. We can affect the most change locally. To give kind of an analogous situation, you think about the global news or even just the national news, and it's like, well, how much power do I really have, sitting in my home in Seattle or sitting in my home in Dallas or sitting in my home in Steubenville, Ohio, have of what's going on in DC? I mean, it's quite minuscule, right? The closer you are, the more power you have. And it's alluring to look over at DC. It's alluring to look over at London or Paris or whatever else, because you see rule by quantities instead of rule by qualities. Power is extended, it's limited, but it touches more people. And so that seems more, in that regard, it seems more powerful. And it seems like it's really something that if I want to be or seem greater than I am, then that's where I'm going to pay my attention. When, obviously the most influence I have in my life right now is over my, wife and my kids. There's an incredible amount of power that I have there. It's just the scale of it is very small. And I think in the same way, what some of us are able to do and affect in our investments, if we're truly building up things, some of you might be of these incredible at a scale of incredible wealth where you can affect change for larger systems that may be truly needed, or at least be a great aid to us. But most people are going to be able to pivot and start building up locally and affect the most change and find the most fulfillment in it, just because that is where the most power is truly available to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to, the principle, was it Jordan Peterson, who talks about how, you clean your room if you want to change the world. First, clean your room. So, really taking control of the same principle there of really taking control of what you first have greatest control over, I think is so important. Well, Jacob, we really appreciate your time today and all your insights. I think a lot of our viewers are going to have to listen to this interview a couple times to really, have it soak in there. And it's a way of thinking that is radically different from, so many of the conventional investment thinkers out there. So we really do appreciate your time. If our viewers are interested in learning more, where can they find you?
Yeah, newpolity.com. I would say, one addendum, it is so different. And I was certainly in that same world and certainly of the same mindset. So this is not kind of a naive pie in the sky vision from someone that never knew the workings of the financial world. This was kind of a hard, difficult, oftentimes rebellious feel that I had in my own life, feeling that I don't want to think differently about this. And so this is the change of mindset really needs to, if it's not ultimately followed up by a change in your loves and an effect of happiness, then we might try and do it a different way again. In the College of St. Joseph the Worker, which is something that has been a major focus of mine, building up this new college that avoids debt completely and enables students to both be built up intellectually and then built up in the trades, is kind of one of the many fruits of this change of mind. That there is a lot of joy, in being able to think differently and then act upon that new thinking. Our beliefs and our behaviors really are one and the same thing. And so I do think that if ultimately these are just kind of ideas that we might hold and not lives that are changed, so that we never really get to truly enjoy the happiness that comes from that new life, then, keep doing as you are, I'd say.
Fantastic. Well, Jacob, we really appreciate your time. We'll put a link in the description of this video to all the resources that you have for our viewers. Once again, thank you so much for your time, and God bless.
Thank you so much for your invitation. Appreciate it.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for January 8th through January 15th, 2024, while supplies last. First this week, we feature backdated 1/4 ounce gold eagles at just $65 over melt. Next, the Armenian 1 ounce silver Noah's Ark coin is $3.49 over spot. And finally, we have a very limited quantity of 1 ounce silver Trump Wanted bars at $3.15 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.